Hey, alright, so in today's video we're going to be learning about plant systems. So this is all about plant growth, development, and reproduction. Okay, so we're going to be talking about plant systems. And we're also going to be talking about this thing called tropisms, which are how plants react to their surrounding environment. Okay, so for plant systems, the three systems that we're going to be talking about are vascular, dermal, and reproductive. So those are the three systems that we're going to be learning about. And tropisms, we're going to be learning about four tropisms. The four tropisms that we're going to be learning about are phototropism, gravitropism, and hydrotropism. Okay, so just put tropism on the end of all these. Okay, phototropism, hydro. Those are the four tropisms that we're going to cover in this video as well. Okay, so let's get started with talking about systems, the vascular, dermal, and reproductive. Let's start with that. Okay, so I'm going to list out the three systems here: vascular, dermal, and reproductive. Vascular, dermal, and reproductive. I'm just going to put repro for short, okay? But y'all know what I'm talking about. So we got the three systems, and then I'm going to list out the parts that make up those systems, and then I'm going to list the job that that system does, okay? So let's start with vascular system. The vascular system is made up of parts called xylem and phloem. Now, xylem is a tissue that transports water up from the roots to the very top of the plant. And phloem is a tissue that carries glucose from the leaves where photosynthesis happens, because that's where glucose is made. Glucose is made during photosynthesis, but that takes place in the leaves, and after it takes place in the leaves, that glucose has to be moved from the leaves up to higher parts of the plant, and also down, all the way down into the roots to the lower parts of the plant, because every single part of the plant needs glucose. Okay? So the job of the vascular system is simply to transport. What are we transporting? We're transporting all sorts of things. We're transporting food, water, minerals, anything that gets moved around from point A to point B inside the plant. It happens here in the vascular system. Okay, number two. The dermal system. So dermal means skin. That word derm means skin. That's why a dermatologist is a skin doctor, because that word derm, that's what that means. Okay? So this is like the skin of the plant. So the parts of the plant that act like the skin, there's actually three of them. I'll list them out here. 1, 2, and 3 parts. One is the epidermal cells. 2 is the, I don't want to forget anything. Okay, I got mixed up. Stomata, which we've talked about, and the third one is the cuticle. Okay, so epidermal cells are like the skin that wraps around the outside of the plant. It does the same thing that your skin does. Okay, so when I say epidermal cells, I'm basically talking about skin. Okay, it's the equivalent of your skin. Stomata are the equivalent of the pores in your skin. And remember that in stomata, There's a separate video where we talk about stomata. And stomata are tiny little pores in the leaves, and that's where gas comes into the plant, like CO2, because that's what plants breathe in, and that's where gas and water also leave the plant. So we talked about that previously. But they are pores that allow gas exchange. And the cuticle, which is like a waxy covering. Okay. Now the job of the epidermal cells, which is the skin, is to protect the plant, to separate the inside from the outside. The stomata, which are like the pores, that's to allow gas exchange. When I say gas exchange, remember that means CO2 in and O2 and water out. Okay. And the cuticle is a waxy covering that covers the leaves, and the reason it's there is for water retention. The word retention means to retain. To retain means to hang on to or to keep from escaping. Okay? So the cuticle, if you've ever seen a waxy leaf that looks glossy, so the leaf looks kind of shiny, that's the cuticle. And water and stuff still leaves through the leaves, still escapes from the leaves, but just less of it because that cuticle is there. It retains more of the moisture. And then the reproductive system. Okay, so the reproductive system has two parts. Part one is the stamen, which is the male part. And part two is the pistil, which is the female part. So it's easy to remember that the stamen is the male part because it has the word men in it, so that's kind of a giveaway that that is the male part. That's not why it's called the stamen, but that's just a way for you to remember that stamen is the male part of the reproductive portion of the flower, okay? The reproductive organs of the flower. So stamen is the male part, pistil is the female part. We're going to go over those two specifically in more detail in a second. And the job of that is obviously reproduction, right? To make babies. The job is to reproduce. Okay. Vascular system made up of xylem and phloem. Xylem moves water up. Phloem moves glucose after it's made in the leaves, up or down. And the job is transportation. Dermal system, made up of epidermal cells, which are like your skin that protect the plant. Stomata, which are pores in the leaves that allow for gas exchange, CO2 in, O2, oxygen, and water out. The cuticle is a waxy covering over the leaves that increases water retention or keeps the water from escaping. Because remember, water is one of the things that leaves from the stomata. It breathes out water just like you do. You breathe out water vapor too. And that cuticle just allows less of it to escape. And then reproduction. The reproductive system is made up of the stamen, which is the male part, the pistil, which is the female part, and their job is obviously to reproduce. So now I want to look more closely at these two on the next slide here. So we've got the stamen and we've got the pistil. Now the stamen is just made up of two parts. Okay, we have this part, which is the anther, A-N-T-H-E-R, anther, and we have this stem. Basically, it's basically just like a support stem that holds up the anther. Okay, and that's called the filament. Okay, so that's part one, and that's part two. All right. The pistil looks like this. It kind of looks like a vase of some sort. Okay? And it's made up of three parts. We have this top part, which is called the stigma. We have this middle tube, which just connects the stigma. Connects the stigma part, which is the ovary. Okay. So the pistil has three parts: style and ovary. Now let's go back to the stamen. The anther here, the part, there's nothing much going on with the filament. It just holds up. Pollen is actually made and stored. And inside the pollen, in case you don't know, pollen is just a little vessel that transports sperm. Sperm cells of the plant are actually inside of each pollen grain. So think about that next time you go out to your car and it's covered in yellow stuff in the spring. So the pollen flows through the air, gets carried away by the wind, and it lands on the stigma. Now the stigma is sticky, so I actually have my students remember this like sticky stigma, okay? Sticky stigma, sticky stigma. The stigma is a sticky surface, the pollen lands on it, and the sperm that's inside of the pollen that swims down the style, which is this tube here, and fertilizes the ovary, which is just an egg. Okay, so this is a lot like what happens in people, where the sperm swims to the egg and fertilizes it. Only it's done through the air. Okay. All right. So moving on from that. So we talked about the three. So we talked about the three systems. Now I want to talk to you about tropisms. First of all, what is a tropism? Well, a tropism is a method in which the plant reacts to a stimulus. A stimulus is something that happens in the environment. A bright light, a loud noise, someone hitting you. These are all stimuluses that you can respond to by squinting your eyes or covering your ears or wincing or dodging and ducking, right, if someone's trying to hit you. So these are all things that these are all tropisms, ways for you to react to a stimulus. And plants actually have 4 of them. Okay? Plants are able to sense things in their environment and either go towards them or away from them. And this is what we call positive and negative. So there's positive tropisms and negative tropisms, meaning that you grow toward something or you grow away from it. So plants, you might have seen that they grow toward the light. Well, this is what's called phototropism. Plants are responding to a stimulus in the environment, which is light. If it was positive tropism, that means that the plant would be growing toward the light. Negative, the plant will be growing away from the light, but plants don't really grow away from light. The roots do, not the shoots though. The shoots above ground will grow toward the light and have positive phototropism, or the roots will grow down away from the light, which would be negative phototropism. Okay. The next one is gravitropism. So grava is short for gravity. This is a response to gravity. So plants can either grow toward gravity or away from gravity. Obviously the roots grow toward gravity, so roots would have positive gravitropism. And the shoots, though, the part that's above ground, has to grow against gravity. So that would be negative gravitropism. The top part of the plant above ground would be negative gravity. The third one would be thigmotropism. Now, thigmo is a word you probably haven't heard before. It's a prefix and it means touch, okay? So this is a plant's response to touch. A famous example would be a Venus flytrap. A fly lands and touches the trap closes, and that would be an example of thigmotropism, okay? And the last